Of course. Of course. Oh, okay. Is that O'Sullivan? Oh, okay. Well.
No.
Geez, you've picked a bad time to walk in the room now. You cut the air with a knife. And now it's your time for a carver.
I look forward to reading the transcript.
Oh, don't go. No, don't go, guys. Stay. Stay for our service. Michael, stay for our services.
That's
Now,
right.
before you go, now, Mark, tell me, is that a private road?
No, it's not.
No, it's Narwana Road, and it goes from.
Welcome, Mr. Hartfield. Would you like to make a brief opening statement? You sure? Okay, thank you. Now, we have 4 senators that want to ask questions, but there's one in the room now. Senator McDonald.
Thanks very much. Good evening. Look, I've got a specific question about operating strips.
What time's smoking?
Mount Isa, biggest inland city in Queensland, possibly the second biggest in northern Australia. For 36 or 48 hours last January, no regulated aircraft, what is the term? Regular passenger aircraft landed there. I want to understand from you, please, regular public transport. I want to understand from you, is this because the equipment on the ground-based equipment, is not adequate, or what's going on there?
Senator, that aerodrome, or Mount Isa aerodrome, is what we would call a non-controlled aerodrome. There's no air traffic control service there.
Yes. Abolished under Dick Smith under the Castle years, yes?
So reference the equipment standard that we would provide at the airport is continually certified and run, and I'd have to take it on notice on the exact day whether there was a failure of any of the equipment at that particular time. The only thing that I can know, with not knowing the exact date and details, if it was weather related and the instrument approach for the aircraft to arrive at the airport, whether the aircraft would be able to go below the minima altitude.
Yeah.
At that aerodrome, there is a procedure called what's called Barrow VNAV, which is so that the aircraft can come in during poor weather. Yes. The base of the weather that would need to be is about 600 to 500 feet above ground level. So if it was below that, they wouldn't have been able to get in due to weather.
Yeah. So it wasn't below that. I was on one of the aircraft that turned back, and I've been flying into that particular airstrip for a very long time. It just perplexed me that in that week I was turned back from Mount Isa, where there was daylight, good visibility, clearly see people on the ground, and in the same week I landed in Sydney in a wild storm. I landed in Canberra in fog, and yet in Mount Isa, the second biggest regional city in Northern Australia, for nearly 2 days you couldn't land or take off from there. And so that's not your problem. That's active nature. But I want to know, what is the equipment? What needs to happen that doesn't happen again in the future? This is really busy. We've got big mining contracts there. We had a lot of conferences. People are living their lives, medical procedures. How is it that we don't have suitable equipment that planes can access that strip for 2 days when it wasn't raining? It was low cloud, but it was good visibility.
Senator, if I could ask that we get the details of it to have a look at, because the issue that if the weather was good, then the equipment that we would provide or whatever wouldn't be, for example, if what we would call visual conditions, the pilot is able to land visually, so I'm not sure what, but if I get the details, then we can have a look and see what may have happened on that day.
I'll get you the dates to take away
Yeah,
on
please.
notice, but it
Please.
is of significant concern to me that the second biggest city in Northern Australia you can't land at in conditions that in every other city in Australia would have just been brushed aside. It wasn't raining, it wasn't storming, there wasn't electricity, it wasn't wild winds, low cloud, but I wouldn't have thought that that was so difficult that we couldn't manage it. And so I will pursue this as Qantas and Virgin know, because I've already talked to them about it, and it seems to be coming back to what's the equipment that's available in order for the aircraft to do a more instrument-assisted approach, or I don't know, but I need an answer, because this is surely not acceptable in 2023 that an inland city like Mount Isa can't have aircraft land or take off. And I assume that the RFDS has got special provisions?
So if they don't have any special provisions other than what regular public transports do. So it could be equipment that are in the aircraft, which is up to the airlines to make sure that they've got the equipment associated with what's the requirement at the aerodrome. So that's what I said. If we can have a look at the dates and the details, we'll have a look to whether the reason why the flights didn't go in, because the reason that you can sort of, we were talking about landing at Sydney, etc., in poor weather or even here in Canberra, is that the equipment's there is designed so that aircraft can land in the weather. Yeah. But as you've articulated it, weather wasn't the issue. So there must be something else.
Low cloud, I assume.
Yeah. And if the low cloud, so we just need to have a look.
All right, I'll provide you that information on notice. And that's the end of my questions, Senator Still.
McDonald, are there any other further questions to Airservices? Senator Senator White, Senator Brockman, Senator, have a go. Senator Brockman, have a crack.
No, I'm happy for Senator Mackenzie to go.
Okay, Senator Mackenzie, have a go.
Okay. I just wanted to go to ANO recommendations. On the 11th of October 21, Airservices releases a statement from its Board of Directors confirming they've all accepted the 4 recommendations put forward by the Aircraft Noise Ombudsman in his investigation of noise complaints in Brisbane, and I am obviously been engaged with this community, as you know, Mr Harfield, for a while, since taking over the Shadow portfolio responsibilities. Can you please provide an update on the progress made in implementing recommendations 2, 3 and 4?
I'll ask Mr Curran to answer that question, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Peter Curran, Airservices Chief Customer Experience and Strategy Officer. Thank you, Senator. The recommendations that you're referring to, I understand, have all been closed by the ANO, but I would like to take on notice to confirm the detail of all of those. Unfortunately, I haven't got the ANO recommendations with me.
Luckily, thanks to my fabulous staff who are still hard at work. Shout out. Just to remind you, so
11 anyway, Senator.
Well, we'll see, Senator Still. Recommendation 2 was Airservices review the effect of its managerial separation of flight path design, environmental assessment and community engagement, and implement a management structure that includes these functions under the same manager or demonstrates how effective community engagement is incorporated into the flight path change process under the current structure.
Yes, Senator.
So either keep doing it how you're doing it and justify it, or make some significant changes about it. So can you give us confidence about that?
Senator, yes. The ANO has closed that recommendation, and I'm happy to provide on notice a detail of exactly what Airservices has undertaken to do that. But in general
terms... So I want to be really super specific.
Yes.
Okay, are you still doing it like you were?
No, Senator. We've made a number of significant changes, including the way in which we engage communities. We've done work on our flight path design principles, and we've since developed a community engagement standard, which we're consulting communities nationally on at present. But I can confirm that the ANO has closed that recommendation, and we can provide further and better information on the specifics of that.
Just for the sake of those following along at home, on what grounds can the ANO close the recommendations?
On the basis that we provided
They're satisfied, they're completed.
correct documentation that explains how we've responded in detail to that recommendation, and the ANO
Is it like... So we do Senate committee reports, we present them to the Senate, the government responds to these Senating reports. Doesn't mean they're going to do everything the Senate committee particularly recommends at any given time. The ANO, when they close this, is it a bit like noting your response, or do they accept that your response is an adequate response?
The Senator, the ANO will not close it until they are satisfied that it's met the intent.
Perfect. Okay, I look forward to that question on notice. Thank you. My second question, budget to advertise engagement sessions. So in the previous estimates, you reported that you made $111 million in revenue from Brisbane Airport alone in the last financial year. That was evidence to last estimates?
That would have been the portion of the revenue received would have from the flights going into Brisbane would have been under 11 million.
That's as I took it. You'd spent $11 million on consultants, and you'd allocated $15 million to implement the recommendations arising from the post-implementation review in Brisbane. That was the evidence given then. On the 12th of April this year, Airservices released a schedule of 13 drop-in sessions for communities to raise concerns with the noise sharing proposal as part of the Noise Action Plan for Brisbane. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Thank you. I've been advised that residents are concerned that these 13 sessions were not only very poorly advertised, particularly considering that new suburbs will now be affected. How did we advertise these?
Thank you, Senator. We undertook a number of activities to raise community awareness about these consultation sessions, and I'm just looking for the numbers specifically on that and the process we undertook. So we undertook the sessions at 13 locations. As you said, we had more than 850 attendees at them, and we just bear with me. Okay, the advertising, the activities that we undertook for these 13 sessions included notifications to communities through our Engage website, which has an outreach to 1,700 subscribers.
1,700.
1,700 subscribers.
1,000. So Engage. Okay, so 1,700 subscribers. How many impacted households are in this area?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice because there's a number of communities, but if I can run through, there's quite an extensive.
Are we talking like a couple of thousand, or are we talking tens of thousands?
It's tens of thousands, Senator, across Brisbane.
And we've advertised it on something with 1,700. Okay, no worries, keep going.
We did outreach through our through those who we hold in our database that have previously made complaints, which is 3,312. We distributed information through a letter and social media tile for sharing to state and federal members. On the 20th of April, we launched the Noise Action Plan for Brisbane, community feedback, and we did that through a range of media inquiries. We held a press conference on the 21st of April, which was attended by TV channels 7, 9 and 10. ABC also covered the story, but without interviewing Airservices. We held a media interview on the 10th of May at Toombul Community Session, which was attended by Channel 7, and then we advertised in a number of newspapers, including the Courier Mail. We placed 2 advertisements in a new farm.
A full page advertisement in the Courier Mail? Page 2?
I'd have to take that on notice. I have got a copy of it.
Up in the back in the...
It wasn't up in the back. It's probably somewhere between the two, I would say, Senator.
Okay, I'd like that on notice.
We advertised in the new farm, so these are targeted into areas where we know that communities will be impacted or potentially impacted by the options that we're consulting on. The New Farm Village News, the Kenmore Local Bulletin, the Moreton Bay Sentinel, Ipswich News Today, Logan West News, My City Logan, and the Village Pump Sanford. We also advertised on Facebook, which included online advertising targeting the geographic locations of the 13 community meetings that we were conducting.
How many followers do you have?
We advertise that through Facebook groups, and the information I have is that the population that reaches is 1 to 2 million. That's fairly broad, but that's what we were aiming to reach. We also use local Facebook groups. We undertook some consultation as a part of the post-implementation review, which we closed out in December last year. And that consultation, we specifically asked communities, how can we consult better, understanding that we were going to be going through this noise action plan over the next year or so. And the feedback we got was to use local Facebook groups. So we engage with local Facebook groups, and there's, I think, 30 or just over 30 local Facebook groups. I have a list of those. I can provide that on notice.
No, on notice, that'll be fine. So how much in total did that advertising spree cost?
$191,551, including GST.
Thank you. Airservices, you confirmed you'd received noise complaints from people across 134 suburbs in estimates 21-22.
Okay.
And in estimates 22-23, that figure increased to 226 suburbs. Are they only Brisbane suburbs? Are they noise complaints across different states?
Senator, I'd want to take that on notice, if I may, but I believe that would be across a national frame, not just Brisbane.
Could you just take, so we can break that
Thank you.
Down as to where Brisbane Airport has been to others. And if you could break that down by a monthly number of complaints received online, by phone, by post, and list the suburbs in which the complainants live. If that data is available.
Just to confirm, you just want the method that we've received the complaints.
And the number by month.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. Just following up on my Quan 99, can we turn to that? I just want to seek clarification. I'll wait till you've got it, gentlemen, because it is around a quote.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So in the answer, the phrase "the management of community and political responses" is from the key messages document. Is that correct? So I'll read the whole quote.
Yeah, thank you.
To enable long-term growth at Brisbane Airport Corporation must maintain the ability to operate with minimal operational constraints. This will be achieved through the management of community and political responses to increased aircraft noise complaints and the balanced optimisation of flight path operations for noise benefit and efficiency.
Senator, I think that's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. So how are you currently managing community and political responses?
Senator, as referenced in the Quan response, the management of community and political responses in relation to the stakeholder feedback and the engagement process through the Brisbane new parallel runway post-implementation review process. So that process was completed in December last year. The post-implementation review was published and made reference to all of the recommendations that were in that review to form what's called the Noise Action Plan for Brisbane. That Noise Action Plan for Brisbane, we're currently going through 3 tranches of community engagement this calendar year. We have just completed the first tranche, which was the 13 community engagements you were referring to just previously, and that process involved going out to communities with a range of options to see ways that we can reduce or minimise the impact on communities of aircraft operations noise. We're taking that feedback through our process to understand which of the options we can take forward and potentially implement. We're also engaging with the community forum which has recently been established for Brisbane, the Brisbane Airport Community Airspace Advisory Board. That board had its first meeting on the 18th of May, is chaired by the former Aircraft Noise Ombudsman Ron Brent and consists of 5 community members along with participants from Airservices, the Department, Airlines and Brisbane Airport Corporation. So we're continuing to engage extensively with communities and elected representatives to understand how we can continue to minimise or find ways to minimise the impact of aircraft noise.
Thank you. Have you learnt anything from your Brisbane experience that you're taking to Sydney now that the New South Wales election's over? Hansard note the wry smile.
Senator,
You don't have to answer it.
Senator, thank you. I think we've taken an enormous amount of learnings out of the Brisbane process. As we mentioned, I think at the last estimates, perhaps the biggest learning has been the fact that we haven't in this country had a national community engagement standard for aircraft noise, and so there's been a significant amount of work gone into developing a draft standard. We're consulting nationally on that at present. We've invested in a range of national and local media, newspaper and social media activities to build awareness with communities, and we're now conducting a series of face-to-face workshops over the next 6 weeks or so, and then there'll also be a series of virtual workshops to be able to extend that outreach so we can understand what good looks like from a community engagement viewpoint as it relates to aircraft noise, and that will become core to how we work going forward.
I know other senators are here to ask questions, and I've got a raft of questions for Airservices Australia. I just wanted to ask about an issue that was reported in the Australian Business Review on the 11th of May this year about an internal investigation that Airservices Australia is undertaking around the directions issued by a controller at the Sydney Airport. Are you aware of the investigation I'm talking about?
Yes, the incident, yes.
Yes, the incident
yes.
where something catastrophic could have actually occurred, Mr Harfield. Do you want to talk the committee through what occurred? I mean, at the moment we're just relying on media reports. It would be beneficial, I think, for this committee to understand Airservices investigation, what occurred and what action you're taking.
So, Senator, the incident that was described in the report occurred on the 29th of April. What was occurring was at all stages through the entire incident where all the aircraft were under control. So,
of the pilot?
No.
Or of Airservices Australia?
Of Airservices and under the controller.
Right.
To walk through the facts of the incident is that there was an aircraft landing on the runway, and the first 737 was lined up to depart on the runway and cannot depart until the other aircraft has taxied off the runway. The controller made that decision with another aircraft on final, 7 nautical miles out from, or 10 kilometres away from that, which is just normal practice. And that the aircraft that was vacating the runway was slower than what was expected. As a result of that, the controller then departed the other aircraft on the runway when they left, but then realised that the aircraft that was on final was closer than what normally did, and then instructed the aircraft to go round, which is just normal practice. You sit there. As the aircraft was going around, the controller was then, because this was at night, even though the controller could see it all, gave instructions in the go-round to turn a particular way. But as was noticing how the situation was occurring and what was going was closer than what they were expecting, they asked the aircraft to turn earlier than they expected. The issue is that stage when the aircraft was turned away from the departing aircraft was because it was at night, it was technically below what's called the lower safe altitude, even though the controller can see the aircraft, and that's what's under investigation on how this deteriorated to take that action. At all stages was the aircraft being ensured the safety between the aircraft. It just didn't comply with the procedures, and it was different to what the controller has expected to occur. But the go-round, the turning of the aircraft is all about maintaining safety, which is normal practice. It's just that the first plan that the controller had didn't occur, and so they went to plan B, and then caused it wasn't in compliant with normal instructions, and that's what's under investigation to ensure that there is learnings from it.
So there was no risk that these two planes could collide?
There was no risk that the aircraft could collide.
Despite some modelling showing that could have been quite catastrophic?
Without intervention or talking to sit there, which was not the case.
I'm sure the pilots, the aviation staff, and indeed the tens of thousands of passengers that rely on the safety of our network hope that's the case. Mr Harfield, when would this investigation be completed?
I'd have to check on where our internal investigation is at, but
is there an external one as well?
Yes, there is. There's under
Who's
normal
running
circumstances is the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, which was called in to investigate, which is the independent investigator.
And when is that handing down their report?
You'd have to ask the ATSB that. I don't know. It's fully independent.
Okay. And just finally, can you supply all... Now, this is an incredibly long acronym. SODPROPS?
SODPROPS, which is Simultaneous Opposite Direction Runway Operations.
Thank you so much, Mr Harfield. Your experience is showing. Daytime and nighttime ops in an Excel spreadsheet format since the opening of the new runway in Brisbane on the 12th of July 2020. Are you able to supply that data?
We should be able to supply that data.
Thank you. And it'd be really appreciated if it could also include the dates, number of SODPROPS flights and hours of operation of SODPROPS.
We should be able to provide that.
Excellent. I look forward to receiving that. I'll see for others and I'll come back, please.
Thank you. Senator Brockman.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to follow up. I was reading an article, I believe it was a few weeks ago, about an incident you had with Qantas where they blamed a particular delay on the unavailability of air traffic controllers and you requested a correction. Did that ever happen?
We did not get the correction, Senator.
Right. So can you talk us through what actually happened?
So on the day, I forget the exact day, I think it might have been the 8th of May, for there, not sure. As normal standard is that the night before we have a teleconference with all of the airlines where we have a look at the weather and the configuration at our major ports, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. And we look at what the capacity is for things based around the schedules and whether we have to run a ground delay program. On Sydney, on the day, it was forecast, I think it was a Monday, it was forecast that it would be strong westerlies, and so Sydney would have to go down to the single runway operations, which would restrict capacity. And so the program's in. That night, for whatever reason, Qantas sent text messages and published that to passengers that their flight could be delayed or cancelled the next day due to air traffic control staffing shortages, which was not the case, and it was all due to weather at Sydney Airport.
So were there any air traffic control staffing shortages?
Not on that day, Senator.
Not on that day. Well, I guess that begs the question, and everyone in this room would have been to, literally hundreds of businesses who are having trouble securing experienced, competent, properly trained staff. Can you talk me through your two key pressure points, in particular air traffic controllers and fire services at airports? How are your employment pathways going? Obviously, there would be an attrition rate, I assume, in both of those sectors. Can you talk us through how you're going in terms of finding and training new recruits into those professions, and if there are shortages or potential shortages on the horizon, what you can do about that?
Senator, thank you. I'll start with the air traffic control and then I'll go to the firefighters. The air traffic control is that, yes, there's a normal attrition. Where we're seeing the shortages at the moment is that we have a number of pressure points, what I would call in the system. One of the things that has occurred during COVID is our trainee rate that we were expecting through. It didn't come through as what we did because we also did during the middle of COVID, where we were balancing on decision making in regards to whether we kept our training pipeline going or hold on to our senior staff, for a better term. We decided to run what we called a retirement incentive scheme for those that were 56 or over as the 1st of July 2021. And the reason that we did that is that that was a cohort that would be retiring from 2021 in that 3-year period. And we wanted to make sure that we kept our trainee pipeline open. While we were grateful for the government assistance as supporting us through that particular period, it still didn't top us up to what we were previously, and so we had to...
Sorry, I'll just let you know it is 9 p.m, so Mr Harfield, we will come back. You'll still have the call, but I'm very keen for staff and everyone listening. If you want to just finish off that question, Mr.
And during that time, to make that decision, we sit there, was upping the trainee rate. We didn't necessarily get the trainees through that we were expecting during that time, as well as some of our workforce deployment. We've had a couple of pressure points that as we recover, and some of the recovery has been faster and in different areas than we expected coming out of COVID. However, what we've done is that we've upped our trainee recruitment. The number of applicants isn't usually an issue. And so we're actually finding that we get the applicant rate through what we normally do in the air traffic control space. And now we're concentrating on making sure that what we would call speed to competence. In a normal circumstance, somebody coming off the street to become a usable air traffic controller, it takes about 2 years. So there's a lag time, so we're trying to make sure that we speed through and making sure that we're getting the best use of some of our technology and the way that we utilise technology to do more, because the aviation industry is actually changing shape and is very different to what it is, and so relying on just pumping staff in is not going to solve all our problems due to the pressures that are around. And so our likelihood with air traffic control trainees is quite positive. It's just working out how we can get them in the door and up to speed at a faster rate, because 2 years becomes too long for some of these periods. Right. When it comes to aviation rescue and firefighting, we are...
Sorry, but is there a lot more to go?
From his cuppa.
I'm just going to just talk about the firefighters very quickly.
No, I'm just saying, you can come back and do that.
I'll finish the firefighters up afterwards.
Sorry, Mr Harfield, I was running out of puff listening to you, but that's fine. But we will take a break, 15 minutes, come back for comfort break for everyone else. Thank you.
Yep.
Geez, you're on.